to a short notice webinar. The first notification about this just went out a couple of days ago, and this mapping project, unfortunately, has to move much more quickly, I think, than most of us are comfortable with. I'll talk a little bit about why that is as we go through this, but this webinar is intended for anybody that received a notification that they have a first round award, but any PSAP interested in applying may also be interested in this information. So we're going to run through how the grant works. We're going to run through what to expect next and kind of help you guys understand what we need from you to get going, and then what we need from you for the whole process to go forward. If anybody has any questions along the way, I will try to keep an eye on chat, or you can unmute and just let me know. But let's move on and just talk a little bit about the grant. So as a reminder, this was $2 million that was provided to us for this grant by the legislature for fiscal year 26, which is July 1st of 2025 to June 30th of 2026. That date matters a great deal because the way state funding works, we are only guaranteed access to the money until June 30th of 2026. So we have to be done. We have to have all of the bills paid, or at least all of the invoices in before that date. So there is no delay that is really available to us kind of on this first round of funding. I will say that, as I've mentioned before, when this first came up last year, the legislators that brought it to our budget expressed some interest in continuing the funding so that there may be additional funding for future years, but that is by no means guaranteed. So we are going to be putting data together to try to support the idea that additional funding is needed if they want to see all of the schools mapped, which was the original goal, I think. But there's no guarantee. So we're going to treat this round, until we know different from the legislature, like the only round we will get. And I encourage you to do the same, just in case that is how things end up. So in round one, 148 facilities were awarded to 42 different 911 centers. That was every application we had at the time. And it was the first 4 schools on that application if they had 4 schools on their application. If you only had 1 or 2 or 3, but your application was in time, then we just awarded what you had. So that's kind of how that decision was made. And I put down there that shuffling has commenced. And that is because there were some people that were disappointed with the number of schools, or thought that they would be getting more, or perhaps that it would be awarded at a district level. And others who thought, if I only have 4, those 4 that were at the top of my list are probably not the 4 that I want. Before we get done today, I'm going to go through with you how to adjust that order. And kind of show you the best way to handle that if the top 4 that you had, the ones that I emailed you about, were not the right ones. So the reason that there were only 4, and the reason that we couldn't do it by school district, is that we have to be able to estimate. We cannot overspend. So the 148 facilities, this is a complicated math here, but the 148 facilities are because I used an average cost of $10,000 per facility and awarded as close to $1.5 million using that estimate as I could. That estimate is likely quite high. We'll go over a little bit of the cost information a little bit later, but most small facilities in the state, and most of our facilities are small, are actually going to be quite a bit cheaper than $10,000. But again, I have to be careful not to overpromise. So the idea is this round was set at that high estimate and 148 facilities, and we will wait and see what the initial estimates come back to be. And then those estimates coming back from the vendors are the way we have this built are a hard contract essentially. They can't go over that price unless they get permission to do so for some reason. So once I have those estimates back, I will be able to understand exactly how much I have left in order to award round two. So that's why round one looks like it does. It's also why, as I'll explain here in a minute, round two is going to follow up pretty quickly. Round two is going to be awarded as soon as I have enough math to handle it. So I would assume that once most of you have selected a vendor and those vendors have given me hard estimates for those first round facilities, that I will be able to go ahead and award round two right away. And I have told the vendors this. I have explained our thought process here and have encouraged them, if they believe that there are a lot more facilities, if you're having if you have four facilities that are right in one town and maybe there are a few more in that town as well that you want to have done, that the vendors wait to schedule their trip until the round two awards, because it's possible that you'll be awarded those extra facilities as well. So we're going to do those as quick as we can, probably within the next few weeks. And then there will be a third round, and that will be kind of a cleanup because once again, all of this is just coming off of estimates. As people actually do mapping, as the bills actually come in, they are going to be a little bit different. And we're going to leave a little bit of a buffer to make sure that we can cover anything that comes up that might extend the price for a particular school a bit. And once we get close to the end, we'll know what kind of money we have left. And we will award what is left at that point. I don't know how exactly that is going to go, other than we will go in priority of the earliest applications that we received, and we will only be able to afford K through 12 schools in this round. So some of you early on asked me if we might do other things because the legislation does allow for post-secondary education facilities that are owned by the state. It allows for government buildings, it allows for mass gathering sites, and it allows for healthcare facilities. And if you asked me early on, I probably told you that, yeah, we probably will be awarding some of those. And that's because we didn't have many applications until about 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, we started getting applications, multiple applications a day. A lot of schools added to the applications, and the whole dynamic of how many facilities we needed to map changed. So unless a bunch of things cancel out at this point, which I don't expect, we already have more K through 12 schools than we can probably afford. So we will not be doing anything but K through 12 schools. Critically, this includes things that are right next door to K through 12 schools. You guys understand that 911 allowable uses have trained us all to understand there are some things you can spend money on and some things you can't. This money, this $2 million, has a lot of limitations. And one of the biggest ones is that K through 12 schools are its primary priority. So I can't spend even a dime on a government building or a post-secondary education facility or a hospital or anything like that until there are no more open applications for K through 12 schools. I know there are going to be a bit of frustration about that from the vendors. There's going to be a bit of frustration about that from the vendors. They have been informed of this because they'd like to do everything you want to do in that town at one time. Of course they would. You know, it's easier for them. It's probably better for you and your responders in terms of being able to have all the maps that you wanted for one town. It's just not how the money's allowed to be spent. And so the only way that anything but K through 12 schools can be done this year is if you fund it locally. And you are welcome to do that. If all your schools are getting done through this grant and you want to add a couple of other facilities that you pay for directly or that the facility pays for directly, that's the reason we did the contract the way we did and the reason I sent you guys pricing so that you can factor that into your selection process. So let's talk about the selection process. So I sent to you guys a comparison document that included the pricing from each of the 3 approved vendors. Those 3 approved vendors are CRG, Datamark, and Geocom. They were required to give us an estimate of how their pricing would apply to a small elementary school that was a single building and a large multi-building urban high school. And we gave them a lot more parameters than that, but that's what you see on that vendor reference sheet. The comparison document. It explains what their kind of overall pricing strategy is, as well as the estimated pricing they gave us for that facility. The prices are not always easy to compare. We have one company on that sheet, that would be CRG, that charges flat rate pricing for schools based on the campus. The other 2 charge differently. They charge by both by square footage and by the presence or absence of maps they can start with to get the data. That makes it a little tough to compare. It's part of the reason that that we had to really break things down as we were looking at all of the bidders that came in. And that's why I added the last piece to that comparison document, which is what $4,500 buys you. And that is because CRG has that $4,500 flat price. I wanted you to understand what you were looking at with the other 2 vendors for that price. And I understand nobody here wants to become an expert in how these guys price things, and neither do I. But if you're thinking about paying locally to have any other types of facilities mapped, or if you're thinking that, hey, if the legislature does not come through with additional funding, we still want to get all of our schools done, then I wanted to make sure you understood exactly what you had available there and what the price comparisons would be. Because as you can see on the sheet, it really depends quite a bit. Who's cheapest depends quite a bit on how big your buildings are and what floor plans they might already have in place. So you have that comparison document. I also sent out vendor reference sheets. These were sheets created by the vendors to pass along to grant recipients about what they do. They decided what material was going to be on there, although I did encourage that they include a few things. But that information was emailed out to you. I have also been provided by some of the vendors links to websites with information about them. We have at least 1, if not 2, scheduling webinars of their own to talk about their products. I'm sure they're calling you. They're going to call you more. So you have lots of opportunities to ask your questions and to kind of get that information. One of the things that I really wanted to be sure you guys had access to was the list of companies that they already have partnerships with. And this came up because one PSAP, and I don't remember who it is, but one PSAP asked us, Do we really need these maps because our schools already have Centigix security and they have a map? And the answer is that's up to you locally, but at least two of these vendors have direct relationships with Centigix, meaning that whatever they produce in this effort can go straight into those Centigix maps. And I thought, well, if that is the case, then it's probably important for PSAPs to know exactly what integrations these vendors already support. Because frankly, the way we asked for the data, we expect that you'll be able to use what you get in almost any application that's out there. And I am not picking on Centigix, it just happens to be the one that came up with a question. But some applications, especially ones where they have their own map built in, can be very picky about what map data goes in there, or can even charge you to integrate map data from some source they don't know. So I thought it was really important for you guys to know who these vendors already had relationships with, what integrations they already supported, and for you to be able to factor that in. Because not only do you have the software that may be sitting, in your local police or sheriff's office, but potentially in your fire trucks, on your MDTs, you name it. But also you have the security software or even the maintenance software that the school may be using. And so there could be a huge benefit to picking a vendor that already has a relationship with the companies whose applications you use. That is why you got a couple of lists of integrations, and you only got a couple because only two of them sent me a list before I emailed everything out. This is part of the issue when everything has to go fast, right? But I have no doubt that if you ask any of the vendors, they will be more than happy to tell you exactly who they have worked with and that they are happy to work with anybody else that you might need. I would definitely suggest you take that into consideration when you select a vendor. Couple of quick questions I've gotten. Who's the best? These vendors were selected because they all three met all of the technical requirements that the board's GIS team has. We developed a technical standard for this. It is unique to Kansas. It is not like anything anybody else is doing 100% because that's just kind of the way we roll. And these were the vendors that proved they could meet that technical standard. So for every purpose that the hosted solution cares about, and for every purpose that we at the State 911 Board are directly aware of, any of the three of these would be fine. If you have local needs that either are not part of what we do or that we aren't aware of, that is going to be the thing that is going to make the difference in these vendors for you. And that's why I'm trying to give you as much information as I possibly can to get things done. Understand that they know our timeline and they know that they have to get moving pretty quickly to get all of this done. And that's part of the reason they're going to be super aggressive about communicating with everybody until selections are made. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen after the vendor selection. So this is just kind of giving you some information about what is going to happen after that from our perspective. So once you select a vendor, we are going to go in and request a formal estimate for every facility you were awarded. The vendor is then, once they get that request, they will go out and collect the information they need to form that estimate. That will probably be a phone call to you and to the school contact you put on your application. This is an important time because it is your opportunity to ask for something specific, if you need something specific for your CAD or for a local GIS app, what we have demanded of them will work in every common application that we are aware of, but there are just some CAD systems and some GIS apps that have kind of unique requirements. One example is Hexagon, which is commonly used in the Mid-America Regional Council footprint in some of their PSAPs. Hexagon CAD requires a data format called shapefiles. While you can absolutely create shapefiles from what we have asked for, and it's not hard, you could ask the vendor just to deliver it straight to you if you required that. I suggest that this is your opportunity to make sure they know what it is you need locally to make this work everywhere you want it to. What we have asked for will make it work in the hosted solution, but you have other applications and you have other mapping applications. And most of these guys have worked with most of the CAD vendors and that kind of thing. So make sure that when you get this phone call, the phone call where they're starting the estimate, that you let them know, hey, this is the CAD I use, and this is the application I want it to work in. Or this is the type of application that my school uses. Do you work with that? And make sure you have that kind of conversation. So if there's anything weird that might actually affect the estimate, they can include it. At this point, they'll also be collecting any existing floor plans. And I'm going to quote one of them in saying, we really don't care if it's an engineering drawing or just something somebody drew on the back of a napkin and then scanned into a computer. As long as we have a floor plan to start from, it just makes things easier on us. So don't think that they're necessarily looking for some very technically advanced kind of floor plans, but I think every one of them would prefer to start from something. So they will be talking to the school about that. The other thing that they're going to do is potentially adjust what all is included in the grant award. And here's what I mean by that. And this goes back to the $1.5 million estimate for round one. A big portion of the expense of getting these maps done is just getting somebody physically on site to walk through the school, to look around the area and do that kind of thing. So what I have told those vendors is, if you get there, or if you start talking about it and you start researching the site and you realize that there is something else that for a very low cost could be added in, something the PSAP has already applied for but maybe was not awarded, let me know. This doesn't mean that the answer is going to be yes on all of those things, but I've explained to the vendors what we're looking for. I've had a couple of different conversations about exactly what we're talking about here. And the big thing is, if you've got, for example, an elementary school sitting right next to a middle school, and it is just going to cost us more money to make them come back, I want them to let me know that, so that they can give me an estimate for doing both buildings, and potentially you'll get both done. I say potentially because all of this is trying to make sure that we are as fair as possible and that we are not overspending that money. We only have $2 million and we don't have $2 million in one. So once they collect all that data, they find out what special stuff you might want, they get the floor plans if there anything exists, then they're going to send us an estimate that includes their estimated cost and their estimated time. This isn't something that you have to worry about because the cost is 100% included by us, or is covered by us, and the time is just something that allows us to track how this project is going. But we're going to take a look at what they send, and it's got to make sense to us. If it doesn't, like if they, for example, send us an estimate that's double the price we thought it would be, or they send us an estimate that's a quarter of the price we thought it would be, or whatever you want to look at there. We're going to ask questions. And potentially, we're either going to ask for changes to their estimate or documentation. And I will give you an example. One of the vendors talked to me about a private school that has a church. And this private school is on a campus that has a church on the same place. And they said, the PSAP would like to have the church done too. They put it in their application. And I explained to them the same thing I told you earlier. I cannot do even one non-K through 12 school until I have done all K through 12 schools that we have applications for. So what I explained to the vendor when they brought this up was, if that is a classroom, for example, if the choir meets at that church and that's how choir class happens, or if working at that church for one period a day is part of what the students have to do, so that somehow that church is actually classroom part of the Monday to Friday school day, then it qualifies as part of that school and can get mapped. But if it is not, it can't. Not right now. Not with grant money. At that point, it is up to the PSAP, the church, the school, whatever, whether they want to pay to have that building done now or whether they want to see whether it could be awarded at some time in the future. That's just the reality of what we have. So that's where kind of the documentation thing comes in. Using that example, let's say that church is used for the choir class, or it is used because that's where study hall happens, or that's, that every student goes there at least one period a day because church maintenance is part of what the students do. Then we need a letter or something saying that. And we'll tell the vendor that we need documentation or we can't include it, and the vendor will communicate with the PSAP or the facility and get that letter for us. But if everything does make sense, or once we get all those questions answered and we get any documentation we need, we will issue what is called a notice to proceed. And that notice to proceed is an official document that will go to the vendor saying, yes, for the price you quoted in the time you said you could do it, you may map this facility. Once they get that, they can schedule going on site and they can get started with everything. So I'm going to go through what happens after that notice to proceed. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions about this stuff or anything that came before?
Sherry, there is a question. What is the deadline for selecting a vendor?
So there isn't a, I'm going to call there isn't a hard deadline, but I strongly recommend that you select one before the end of the month. The earlier you select them, the faster I will have enough estimates to be able to award round 2. And understand that this process is going to take a while. And if we wait too long to get the vendors selected, it is possible that the grant will have to be pulled back because there won't be enough time to finish it. So I recommend you make a selection by the end of the month. The earlier, the better. And I was asked, I see a question in the chat, can you use multiple vendors between different schools selected? 99% of the time that answer is no. The PSAP is selecting a vendor and it needs to stay the same vendor for everything in the PSAP's area. The other 1% of the time is we all know that school districts do not follow necessarily county boundaries or city boundaries or whatever. So if you share a school district with another PSAP that is picking a different vendor, you guys can put your heads together and talk to that shared school district about which vendor should do all of the schools in that district. And this is because the maps look different. The mapping product that comes out of each of these vendors is going to look just a little bit different. So neither the individual school district nor the first responders should really have to look at two different kinds of maps. You want everything to look the same. So we're trying to enforce that as well as we can, but we do understand that, like I said, school districts don't necessarily follow PSAP boundaries. So that's the only circumstance in which you can have one vendor do most of your schools and a different vendor do those last few. Are there any others that I missed?
Sherry, am I correct in, Annette had a question of if it is, wondering if there has to be a signed MOU with the school to
Ah,
proceed, or it is just recommended, and it's not required by the grant, correct?
correct. So the MOU came into being, I know the board has a lot of MOUs that people have seen before, but this one was not ours. This one came from the State Association of School Boards, and their executive director joined us in the planning process and in the RFP. And they were concerned that some schools might not be interested in participating unless an MOU was in place between them and the PSAP so that responsibilities and things were clearly defined. And their legal team wrote that sample MOU. It is still just a sample. It is not required by us. It is not required to proceed. It's between you and the school whether you need one of any kind. And if you guys decide you do, it is also up to you whether you use that one, whether you edit it, or whether you just do something else entirely. Any others? Did I miss anything?
Nope, I think you're good. Oh,
Okay.
how do you
Um,
change a school that was selected to a different school that was not?
I will be going over that and how to select a vendor here in just a little bit.
Perfect.
I'll show you by example. All right. So moving on. So once the notice to proceed happens, the vendor is going to come on site to do data collection or data verification. Data collection will be if they're starting from scratch. Data verification will be if they have a good floor plan that the school is confident in already and they're just coming out to make sure there are no changes or anything. But they must come on site. And this matters. I know we had at least one school express that they already had great maps. They keep them up to date. They just wanted to give the vendor the map and not have a site visit. That is not allowed. The legislation that gave us this money mandated that there be a site visit for every dollar spent. So they do have to come on site no matter how good the school's maps are. I don't imagine we're going to get that concern very often, but I wanted to make sure just in case. So they come on site, they do the data collection and or verification, then they go back home and they make the initial set of maps. The initial set goes to the facility and the facility reviews them. So the maps are to be presented in the format preferred by the facility. This is something we put in the RFP because we know that a few of the vendors that could have potentially won have web applications that they prefer people use to review and interact with their maps, while others use much more paper. And we figured that it was important that whoever the school was going to have from their staff go around and make sure these maps were accurate, that they would be comfortable with whatever format was given. Maybe they're great, they have a tablet or a laptop and they're ready to roll around the school with that thing. Or maybe they'd just rather have a paper map that they can walk around and check things off. Either way, the vendor is required to give them the map in the format the facility prefers. The facility is then responsible to check for accuracy and thoroughness. And what I mean by that is that they're checking to make sure that, the doors are where it says they are, the rooms are where they say they are, the labels are correct. And thoroughness, that if there are fire extinguishers on the map, that all of the fire extinguishers are on the map. If panic alarms, static panic alarm locations are on the map, that they're all there. That's what the facility is checking for. Nothing technical, nothing weird. Just, does this map accurately and completely reflect my school? And when they are satisfied, they will sign a letter of approval. And this letter of approval will come back up a couple of times, but it basically says, this is the facility, this is the PSAP, this is the vendor, and the facility, this is the sign off. So the person to say, yeah, they're done. They've fixed everything I told them was wrong, and I've seen a good quality map. And this middle piece right here, I've blown up for you. The facility is signing this right here. They'll check that box and they'll say they certify they've reviewed the preliminary mapping deliverables, that they find it to be accurate and complete, and they authorize the project to proceed. That's all we want from the school, is that they sign this document and give it back to the vendor. Oh, I apologize. That should have come out of there. Let me pop on down. Then we will be at the technical review. So the technical review is what happens at DASC. So Alan Schaefer will be performing, he's one of the DASC staff. He will be performing the technical review for the most part. But the vendor, once the facility has signed off, can then upload all of the required data and map elements, as well as that letter of authorization from the school, to DASC. And if the letter isn't in there, then the technical review won't start. That's how this process works. So at that point, once it is uploaded, DASC will do a thorough technical evaluation of the data. They will take a look at everything and make sure that it met all of the requirements that we put out in the RFP. They will make sure that everything opens and is usable, that the data makes sense, that it works in the GIS applications it needs to, that the maps were generated the way they needed to be, all of that kind of thing. If they find anything wrong, they'll kick it back and make the vendor fix it. And everything has to be fixed and cleared before DASC will sign their technical LOA. Coming back to this page, this is theirs. The vendor submitted data, metadata, and supporting documentation meet the minimum technical and formatting requirements from the board. It can move on to PSAP review. So that's when you guys come in. The PSAP review means that you get a full delivery of the data, and your approval affirms that the delivery is complete. Okay, so you get everything, and when you sign the LOA on your behalf, that means the project is done, and that is the permission the vendor needs to issue an invoice and get paid. So let's talk about your review a little bit. What should you look for? What do you expect this to be? Well, the first question is, did you get everything you thought you would get? If your CAD, like I spoke about Hexagon, if your CAD requires shape files and you told the vendor you wanted a set of shape files and they didn't include them, don't approve it. Tell them they have to give you shape files. Did you get the maps you were expecting? Is everything in there? Then open the PDF maps. And do they look okay? Do they make sense? Now, of course, By the time you look at this, the facility will have already checked them and so will DASC. But we all know that you can accidentally delete something or you can make a mistake, and these vendors are no different. So if you open them up and find out that, there's no labels on anything, or that they have a bunch of fire extinguishers that are supposed to be in the middle of a parking lot or something weird like that, kick it back. Tell them what the problem is, and just take a look at them to see, do they make sense? Do you think they're right? You're not responsible for knowing where every little thing in a school is, but you are responsible for opening those maps and just making sure that there's nothing super crazy on them. I also suggest you give them to your responders, at least a few, and ask them what they think of how clear they are, of could they operate by them. And then if you arranged for an integration with other software, like your CAD or something at the school, has that process gotten started? Are you comfortable that that is moving, or do you feel like once you sign off, that process is going to be somehow compromised or maybe difficult? Because you don't sign off until you're happy. And I will come back up here, and you are signing off that the final deliverables meet your operational needs and that they are complete, and you are authorizing project closure and invoicing. The vendor takes all three letters, the one you sign, the one DASC signs, and the one the facility signs, and also a final copy of the data, and uploads that whole thing to DASC before they get to send us an invoice, and then we pay them. So I anticipate this question. When will you see it in Radius and Lightning? Likely not until after your project is over and paid for. I say likely because different vendors have different methodologies and different relationships with Rapid Deploy. So all I know for sure is that it will not be until after your project is over and paid for. How long after, though, depends on a few things. We are working with Rapid Deploy on a different method of handling how floor plans go in there. Not that there's anything wrong with the method they have now, but it only works for a few vendors. And we want to be able to handle floor plans that maybe aren't from Rapid Deploy partners. So we're working with them on that, and we have some estimates from them on how quickly that will be available. But development estimates are always soft. They are not guaranteed by any means. So what I will tell you is how long after things are paid for you see them will depend on all kinds of stuff, but you'll see them before the end of 26. Certainly, hopefully months and months before the end of 26. So your next steps, you need to set your order of priority for the facilities. A couple of people early on in the process said, "Oh my gosh, these are not the facilities that I wanted to do first." And I was silly and said, "I'll fix them." And then I got about a dozen other people telling me that they also didn't like the order of their facilities. And I do not have time to go in and handle them all directly. And frankly, it is better anyway if the PSAPs do that themselves. So let me bring up the web portal, and I will show you what to do. So you have put in your critical facility mapping application. When you go in, if you go to view critical facility mapping application, you will see your existing application. But you actually have to click on it and not have a window up. Let's do that again. There we go. So we did not really get an application from KU Public Safety, so I stole them for my example today. The application form looks like this with the facilities down below. This vendor selection is where you go to select your vendor. It has not been there until earlier today. I've had a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, it's not there. I don't know where it is." That's because until we did this webinar, it was not exposed to you. So you can, of course, add more facilities if you want to do that. But here are the facilities, and you will notice that I don't have a first even, because that's just kind of how our priority setup is. You can edit. It's only making sure that you don't have two of the same number. It's not making sure that they're all in order. So if you want to change the order, you go into a facility, you hit edit, and you change it to your first one and hit save. And now it is the first one. So you may have also gone in and seen that you had the 4 facilities marked approved. I have had Kelly, who is the programmer for the portal, I have had her move them all back to pending. So you don't see anything approved anymore if you go into your application. What I need you to do is make sure that numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 of K through 12 schools, your top 4 K through 12 schools, are priorities 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll have to mess around a little bit with the order to reorder things if you need to, but I need you to go in and do that. On Monday, I will start notifying vendors if they have been selected and the order has been changed. So all I ask from you is that you make sure this priority is correct before you put a vendor in that selection box up there. Because starting Monday, if you have selected a vendor here, I'm going to tell them that your first 4 facilities are the ones you need to map. Does that make sense to everyone? So I see Amy's question, what's the best way to combine facilities that we've determined should only be one entry? The best way to combine them is just to delete one of them. You don't necessarily have to list that other school in the facility name, although you're welcome to. If you want to go in and say it's test school 1 and test school, you can do that. Any other questions? That is correct, Cleta. As long as you have a vendor selected before the end of November, you should be good to go. And like I said, that is kind of a soft deadline. And I say that because the vendors are going to start working. And as soon as they can, they're going to start driving around the state and collecting data. So this is why that is a soft deadline, because I may be able to assign more work to them while they're already out, and that'll work out well. It is also why potentially if you wait a whole lot longer after that, you could end up at the bottom of the list and have some trouble with the vendors getting to your project in time. So I would just suggest heavily that you select one by the end of the month, and that will allow me to select round 2 before the end of the year. Other questions there? Yes. So the three vendors are CRG, Datamark, and Geocom. And I am not sure what round two looks like funding wise. If my estimate of $10,000 for a facility, which I think is high, that would be an average. If that's correct, then we only have enough left after that to do one or two additional facilities per PSAP. If my estimate is high, like I think it is, it could probably be a little higher. But I think even at the very cheapest that these estimates could come in at, you can't expect any more than 4 or 5 additional facilities on this $2 million. We just have too many applications. All right. So those are your next steps. And now I'm going to explain a couple of ours. So this is being recorded, as I told you at the beginning, and this will be posted and it will be available to you. Also, information has been sent out to everyone who received an award, vendor reference sheets, some integration lists, and that comparison document I was talking about. All of that information, along with this recording and 2 more documents, will be available on the board's website or on a link from the board's website. And those 2 additional documents are these 2. This is an instructional document for schools in how to do the facility review. I told you what it was. It's not like instructions are necessary. It's just to kind of help people understand that they need to focus on the idea that the right buildings and areas were mapped, the room names are right, that points of interest are both accurate and complete. And then we've recommended some steps that they can do to go through the process and probably who ought to do it. Similarly, we have another document for you guys for PSAPs, and this is to help you with your review. And it just explains those same things I went over in this webinar, talking about the looking to make sure that, it looks like you expected. It's called a sanity check in here to make sure things look right, and to review that you got all the data and to submit your approval. So those documents will be out there as well. That way, whoever is assigned at the school or at the PSAP to do the reviews has kind of a document to go by so they don't have to worry that they're missing something. The last thing I will share is that I have been asked to take the estimates that come in, the money that we are going to spend on this project, and to use it to estimate what it would cost to do the remaining schools in Kansas. That's K through 12. I'm going to produce that estimate and provide it back to the legislature. That does not mean that they're going to award it or even $1 more. I just want to be really clear about that. But I have been asked to produce that, and I will produce it. I see a question: if they have a facility, can they add it now and put it in their top 4? Absolutely, you can. What is not being awarded at this point is any of the applications that came in after the award. So by applications, I mean PSAPs that applied. If you were awarded 4 facilities before, you still get 4 facilities, and you decide what those 4 are. There were a few PSAPs that only had 2 schools on their application. And those schools were, or I'm sorry, those PSAPs were awarded 2 schools. That's all they're going to get because that's the total in the 148 I have. They'll get additional in round 2, but that's all they get for right now. And correct. As of right now, I do not know of any presentations set up with Datamark or Geocom. CRG, as I'm sure you guys know, has been quite aggressive putting out information about some webinars to talk about their products and to explain what they do. I imagine you will hear from the others, but as of right now, the other two have not informed me of any sessions like that they plan to hold. I have let them know that I'm going to put a notice out to all of the PSAPs when we get our website set up and we get all of this information in a place for you to download it. And that I will include any webinars or anything like that they want me to include in that email to you. So they have that long Friday until Friday to get me information about any additional webinars. The other thing that is going to happen is that I am going to provide them, all three vendors, with a list of PSAPs that have received a grant. So if you have not already heard by phone or email or whatever, I promise you will. I have no doubt that every one of you will hear from two or three of the vendors, probably all of them, because we will be providing be providing the list of awarded PSAPs to them again. That's after this meeting. I'll probably be sending it to them tomorrow morning. And I really do recommend that you take a look at the products for everyone. One of the things that the RFP evaluation group really focused on was the fact that in the end, while certainly we want GIS data for this, we want the data to be in Radius, in Lightning, in your CAD system, in whatever system your fire department or law enforcement or EMS might use, whatever system the school uses. We want it in all those places. But in the end, the important thing here is to get a tactical map that is available that can be used by both the school and the responders to make sure everybody's on the same page. So we really focused on what does your map look like? Because GIS data can make a good map or it can make a bad map. The only thing you can be sure of with GIS data is that the data itself has a level of accuracy, but you can put it on a map badly. And so I strongly encourage you to take a look at what their mapping product looks like, especially those of you that don't have local GIS people who could make a custom local map. So if you're going to be operating off whatever map these guys hand you and nobody can do a local map for you that is more custom, make sure you like the map you're going to get. Because that's what your responders are going to be looking at. That's what the PSAPs are going to be looking at. It's what the schools are going to be looking at. And the more clear that is for you, the better. Any other questions? Okay. I am going to throw one more thing into chat. If you do have a question, well, you are always welcome to get with your PSAP liaison, and they can bring the question to me if they don't already know the answer. We do have a critical facility mapping joint email address for this project. So if you have a technical question or a question about something a vendor has delivered to you or whatever, you are welcome to email that email address. It is CFM for critical facility mapping _911 at ks.gov. Like I said, you can also get with your PSAP liaison if you choose to, but that is the email address for this project that we're giving to all of the vendors, and I want you guys to have it as well. And that is all for the day. If you have any trouble with your applications, with doing your reprioritization of your facilities or anything like that, let us know.